Hi, it's Steph, and recently I picked up some new perennials to add to my garden for some late summer and fall color. I'm going to share with you my fall haul, and we're going to get some of them planted. Starting with this plant here, Joe Pye weed. Now this is a pollinator attracting native type perennial that is wonderful for some late summer and fall color. I purchased this variety here, which is called Eupatorium Little Joe. So the Little Joe stays just shorter than the traditional Joe Pye weed, which can get upwards of 5 feet tall. And this one here will stay anywhere in the 36 to 48 inch range, so just a little bit shorter. And I went for this variety because I have a bit of wind in my garden. If it gets windy, things tend to blow around, and I wanted a variety that would be less likely to get floppy with wind. This one seems to have really sturdy stems, and I have a spot picked out for it in my patio bed, so I want to get this one planted today. And I just love the color. It's a really beautiful shade of mauve, pink, a little bit purple with these dark stems. So I'm really excited about this one. I also picked up some anemones. Now anemones are another beautiful late summer, early fall plant. They do like soil that's a little bit on the moist side, and they tolerate some shade and part shade, but you could also put them in sun if the conditions are moist enough. And in fact, in my patio bed, it is pretty moist, the soil. So I thought that that would be a great addition for that bed. Now, the variety of anemones that I purchased, I got two different varieties. One of them is called Whirlwind, and they're both white. Both of the varieties that I purchased are white. The first one is this one here, Whirlwind, and I have the tag, and I'll give you some information on this one. So the Whirlwind is a Japanese anemone, and it gets to be 36 to 48 inches in height. It likes sun to part shade, and it says keep well watered, and it blooms late summer through autumn. So this one here, I am going to also use in my patio bed for some of these white blooms. Now the Whirlwind has double petals, so I think that's going to be really beautiful. The other variety of anemone that I purchased is called Honorine Jobert. And this variety I've had in my garden before, but I had it in a spot that stays a bit dry, and each year the plant got a little bit smaller. So I do think that it could benefit from a little bit more moisture. So I bought it again, and I purchased two of them. Now these I'm planning on putting in a different spot, but the Honorine Jobert or Jobert gets to be also 36 to 48 inches in height, and it needs 12 to 18 inch spacing. It blooms late summer through autumn, and it likes sun to part shade. So I'm also going to plant this one in a sunny spot, and I'm thinking somewhere in one of my front borders. I also purchased some of this Blue Fortune agastache. Now you can call it agastache, some people call it agastache. I say agastache. And the reason I purchased this one was that I was recently watching a video by Erin at the Impatient Gardener, and she actually planted some of these this year in her garden, and they looked beautiful. And so when I saw them at the nursery, they had this really pale lavender color that I thought was just really eye-catching, and it had a really nice upright habit. So I thought that this would make a great plant to put in one of my front borders where I'm planning on taking out some daylilies. So I will be working on that one this week as well. Another plant that I purchased is this one here called Chalone. I actually tried to grow Chalone or turtlehead from seed this year using the winter sowing method. And I did get some seedlings to germinate. The thing that I found out with Chalone is that it is a really slow growing plant. So my baby seedlings probably won't get to a size like this for quite some time. So I recently went to the Home Depot, and I purchased this really large Chalone or turtlehead plant for $19.98. So while I do have a couple of really small seedlings, which I'm going to show you, I'm glad to have picked this one up. In terms of the time investment, I feel like this was just way more worth it. And so sometimes that happens. We grow seeds, hopeful that it'll be more affordable, but when you think about how long it takes that plant to grow, maybe sometimes you're better off just buying a plant that's a little bit bigger. And I also picked up a new sedum. Now I already have a couple of varieties of the Autumn Joy sedum in my garden. And when I saw this one in person, the Matrona with this dark foliage and stems, I really thought it was beautiful. And I actually think it would make a really beautiful contrast next to one of my blue conifers. So Currently, that is my thought, is to put it somewhere near one of my blue conifers. But once I get out there and start placing plants, I'll be able to make a better decision on that. Now, the Matrona is a sedum that gets to be, it looks like it could stand maybe slightly taller than the Autumn Joy, but this contrast in the dark color really drew my eye to it. So those are all of the plants that I picked up, and now I'm gonna get them planted. Here in my patio bed is where I'm planning on planting my Joe Pye weed and the turtle head, as well as the anemones. Now, this Joe Pye weed gets to be about 48 inches in height, so I'm going to plant it in the middle of the bed. Typically, when planting plants that are a little bit taller, the rule is to generally plant the taller plants in the back, medium in the middle, short in the front. But when you have a bed that can be seen on both sides, like this patio bed here, if you plant them in the middle, it gives it some nice height, and then you can put the shorter plants on the other sides that you see, like the back and the front. So I am going to plant this Joe Pye weed in this bed. Now, as I was taking it out of the container to get it planted, I noticed that it was pretty root bound. Now, what root bound means is just that the plant has been in this nursery container for quite some time, and the roots start kind of swirling around and kind of winding around the root ball of the plant. And when that happens, if you weren't to tease these roots and get them loosened up, they would continue to kind of swirl around the root ball and sort of choke out the plant, and it wouldn't grow that well. So you want to just make sure that you tease the roots quite a bit, get them loosened before you plant them in the planting hole. Now, I dug up some daylilies in this bed, and that is where, in the spot that I took out the daylilies, is where I'm planning on putting this Joe Pye weed. Daylilies I'm in the process of removing from my garden. I've had them for quite some time, and I have really enjoyed them over the years. I noticed that after they were done blooming, all the foliage would brown and look really unsightly. And yes, you can cut all the foliage back and it will flush out with new growth. But I didn't want to have the hassle of having to do that each year. So I've decided that I'm going to dig them up, I'm going to pass them on to some gardeners who can enjoy them in their garden, and I will replace them with things that I might enjoy a bit more. So that's what I'm in the process of doing, and I just started with this bed. So the Joe Pye weed is going here, and this chalone. So chalone, or turtle head, actually gets its name because the blooms look like little turtle heads, which is really cute. And I started some from seed using the winter sowing method this last winter. But once I found out that they grow really slow, I just went ahead and bought this big plant here. Here are the seedlings that I grew this year. They're actually tiny. So I have one here that I actually broke during transplant. I have another here, here, and here. So I ended up with about 4 seedlings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dig these up, and I'm probably going to place them somewhere else on the other side of the bed here. And I'm also going to reposition some of these snapdragons. Now, snapdragons is another plant that I started with the winter sowing method, but they're a cool weather plant, and I never got around to planting them late spring, early summer. So I kept them in the container for quite some time. The growth got a little stunted. So I recently planted them in hopes that they maybe put on a little bit of size and maybe even bloom in the late summer, early fall, because snapdragons like cool temperatures. So I'm gonna have to move some of these around, and I'm gonna make some space to plant this big chalone in this spot. And here is where I planted my anemones and the new Joe Pye weed. The whirlwind anemones are a double-petaled white anemone, and I planted one on either side of this grassy clump here, which is actually an iris that blooms in spring. It's also a white bloom, and it's really pretty. And I really enjoy the white bloom contrast with the red Japanese maple. So I thought that this would be a great place to add another white bloom with the Japanese anemones. And right behind the clump of iris is where I planted the little Joe Pye weed. This little Joe also has a really pretty bloom color, and the bees have already found it. There's been bees in and out of those blooms all afternoon. And the dark stems also make for a really pretty contrast with the Japanese maple. I now have two Joe Pye weeds in this bed here. I have the little Joe that I just planted, and I also have another variety called Ragosa Chocolate, which is a variety with dark foliage. Not yet budded, but it should be budding up in the next few weeks. It is a later blooming variety, and it has white blooms. And I also have some zinnias planted here. So I removed some roses that weren't doing well. I put them in pots in the rows I see you, so I will show you an update on that. But I had some space, so what I did was I started some zinnias from seed, and it's filling out a nice gap here. So just as the coneflowers kind of peter out, the zinnias are picking up. I grew Queen Lime Orange, which is probably my favorite Queen Lime zinnia, some Polar Bear White, some Zinniarita, and some Emperor Purple or Purple Prince, which is actually a pink that is really pretty. The chalone I planted right in this area here on the side of my gold mop cypress and underneath my Japanese maple. The Japanese maple's canopy should provide just enough shade to keep it happy, and I love the contrast that it's having with this yellow shrub here, this evergreen. The dark shiny leaves of the chalone against the ferny texture of the evergreen, I think is just working really nicely together. This perennial is pretty budded up at this point and getting ready to bloom. So this is a late summer, early fall bloomer. The blooms last around 3 weeks, so that is really exciting. A little update on my rose ICU. I have some blooms, so it looks like the roses are responding well to being transplanted into these planters. The thing with them being in these pots is that they have a chance to dry out between waterings, which roses like, where in the other bed they were staying pretty moist most of the time. So I'm happy to see that they're responding well to being put in these planters temporarily until I can find a better home for them. And I have a bloom here on my David Austin carding mill, which is a beauty. Here's the Lady Gardener. It's a really beautiful light peach apricot pink color. There are 2 that are fully bloomed and 2 more buds. So here's what I have left from my fall plant haul. I have 2 of the agastache Blue Fortune, my Matrona sedum, and 2 of my Honorine Gilbert anemones. So I will get these planted in the next few days, and I will show you where they're going to go. But that is all for today. Thank you for spending your time with me, and I'll catch you in the next one.
Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, please hit the thumbs up button, and please consider subscribing so you don't miss any of my future videos. And we'll see you soon.